Okay, all right. So we started this topic on Monday and then we discussed it on Wednesday. Now we will continue with this rest of it. And what we have done so far is I think we were discussing about proposed work section. Okay, right. So in proposed work, as we mentioned that you need to provide the proposed work in detail. You can use scientific mathematical tools, notations to describe your work. You can use system architecture, data flow, use case diagrams, etc. You can use figures, block diagrams, flowcharts, algorithms, and we also discussed about what is the difference between preliminaries and novel contribution. You need to make proper arguments for the choices you have made and list out any assumptions. And right, so I think we were here in this slide last time. Okay, so writing experiments, results, and analysis. First of all, we need to state the objective of experiments, what experiments we want to do, and what is their objective. So there are some examples here. You should explicitly mention that the main objective of this experiment is to do, or the purpose of this experiment is to test, and so and so. Okay, there could be it could be written in this way as well. The experiments are designed with the following two objectives, and so on. Okay, experimental setup also need to be discussed properly. With experimental setup, you mean that how did you do the experiment? If you involve certain users, whether users they participated in a lab setting or they participated online, so and how users were divided into groups and so on. Okay, so details should be provided. If you're using a data set for your project and experiments, you need to discuss what is the size of the data set, how it was collected. If you're taken it from some organization, you need to mention it. If you're collecting it from users, whether you have provided them a no identity disclosure document, and so on. Okay. Some examples are that data set. There were 5 video clips have been considered in our experiments, and details of 5 video clips are like this. So you should be explicit in mentioning what data set you have used and provide the details of this data set. Another example is that there are a few data sets available which are related to our work, let's say fake news, but to the best of our knowledge, there is no data set available that serves the need to test the proposed framework. So here in this case, you are mentioning that also there are some already existing data sets, but the data set cannot be used in your case, and therefore you are preparing a new data set for your work. Okay, so that example is coming from a paper, a recent paper in 2019. Okay. All right, and then list out experimental plan. Now, how many experiments you did, and what were those? So one example here is coming from this article, W3 privacy, and that is to demonstrate the utility of the proposed model. We conduct 3 experiments. First experiment we do this, in the second experiment we did this, and finally in the third experiment we did this. Okay, so you can mention these experiments clearly. Another example is you could divide experiments into multiple parts and say that in the first part of the experiment we did this, second part we did this, and so on. Okay, then you need to present your results in some way, and you could use figures, graphs, tables, etc. For example, let's say if you are performing a test to evaluate the efficiency of your application. Let's say if you developed a mobile app and you want to check how much time user take to perform a task. Okay, and then let's say you test it with 10 users and there are multiple tasks 1 to 8, and each user will be taking certain time to perform a particular task. Okay, and then you can find out the average time and so on. So for each task you can list out how much time they took. You could also be doing usability test. Usability test means how easy it is to use for each task. So how easy to perform a task. Okay, so let's say out of 4, on a scale of 4, you ask them to rate, uh, provide their opinion that how easy it was to perform this task. Okay, and then you can provide that in a table form. You could also provide certain graphs if you are analyzing certain parameters. If you increase this parameter, how the other parameter uh, is varying corresponding to one parameter. So you could also present graphs like this. Okay. Then if you talk about novelty, it is important to show in experiments how your results are better than the existing work. Okay, and therefore some sort of comparison is also good to have. That let's say in existing work 24, 22, for in this particular aspects, we got this data. However, with the proposed solution, we got these numbers. Okay, and therefore we can say that quantitative performance of our scheme has been tabulated here, and it shows that this particular parameter for our scheme is higher than existing schemes. So that would show some sort of a comparison between different methods and your proposed work. Okay. There are some general guidelines about writing experimental section, that you should argue whether the claims have been substantiated or not. That means if the claims which you are making that my application of my system is good in this particular aspect, uh, yeah, so whether yeah, so if you are making certain claims that my system is good in this particular aspect, you need to validate those through experiments. Okay, all right, I have some messages here. Let me see that. What is that? Okay, great. All right. Okay, so then next thing is, uh, of course, you need to discuss the expected results, expected findings. So when you present your results in tables and graphs and so on, don't assume that that is sufficient. You need to describe those in text, and you need to refer to specific figures and tables when you're describing those. So that means you need to discuss results. Okay, it's not sufficient just to provide graphs and tables and assume that readers will be able to understand those by themselves. No, you need to provide the description. You need to discuss that in the text. So discuss expected findings, and not only that, discuss unexpected findings. So something you were not expecting, but actually you found that in your experiments. So that is important. Okay. Also, try to identify a wow factor. Okay, wow factor means something really exciting you got, and something which is unique. Uh, from unique has come from this system or application and from experiments. Try to identify that. Okay, although it is hard to do, but that makes your solution very unique and very convincing. Okay. We need to establish the superiority of our method, at least in some aspect. So it doesn't mean that your method has to be, your solution has to be superior or better in all the aspects, but at least in some aspect it should be better than existing solutions, existing methods. Okay. Other than that, we should be careful about writing experiments. We should not overstate the results. We should not say that, okay, our method provides excellent performance. Okay, uh, it's better to talk in numbers rather than using adjective norms, adjective terms, and so on. So we should avoid overstating the results. We should not uh, use like our results are excellent and so on. Better to tell it in numbers. Okay. We should present what is obtained, not like we didn't get results and we actually are presenting in the report. That is like a lie or false statement to make. So we should only present what is obtained in our experiments. Okay. Sometimes you feel that investigating that a given method does not work in certain scenarios. That could also be considered as a finding that this method would not work. Okay. And nobody else could find that whether this method will work or not. Sometimes this also could be considered as a contribution. And then finally, we should list the limitations of our method. And this could be a new section or it could be accommodated in the experimental section. Um, Limitations means we need to mention that in which cases our system or application will work and in which cases it will not work. Under what assumptions it will work, under what assumptions it will not work. Okay. So our method may not work in all conditions. So therefore it is important to identify and discuss the conditions and situations where it may fail. So one example of this is there exist some limitations in the current work and you can then describe those. Okay, then we come to conclusion and future work section. In conclusion, we should state the conclusions, not as summaries. Many times we see that abstract and conclusion, they look like same but written differently. They're like rephrased. In conclusion, you should be explicit in writing what do you conclude from this work. Okay, what is the take-home message from this work? Okay, rather than saying that okay, we propose this method does this method has these features and so on. It's not like a summary. You should not put it as a summary, but just be upfront and mention the conclusions. Okay, you have to be precise and to the point. And then in future work, you also need to say that this you have done, but there are other extensions of this work which can be explored in future. If there is no future work, that means you have completed this problem in all aspect. There's nothing no improvement can be done, nothing can be done further. And of course, this is not the end of the world. There can be further things can be done with respect to this problem. Okay, so you need to mention what can be done in future, how this work can be extended, what aspects you have addressed, and what aspects are to be addressed in future. Okay. All right, then after writing introduction, related work, proposed method, experimental design, testing section, conclusion, then you come to abstract. Abstract comes first in the report, but usually it is written at the end. And what do you write in abstract? So this is very important part of the paper or report, and readers and reviewers usually will read it first. From abstract, you should get a overall idea of the paper, what you have done. So that means all these sections, all these details, what you have presented, introduction, related work, proposed method, experimental design, the gist of this should come in abstract, maybe 1 or 2 lines for each of them. Okay, it should be clear, precise, and complete. Complete means it should cover bit of introduction, bit of related work, bit of proposed method, bit of experimental design, bit of conclusion. Okay. A good abstract would be usually 100 to 150 words. It should not be too long. It should not be too short. Okay. Uh, so one example of abstract is this. So if you look at this here, you'll see that the first statement is the use of social networks has grown exponentially in recent years, and these social networks continue to have an ever increasing impact on human lives. So you are just introducing what particular domain and what particular problem you are addressing. You are addressing the problem of social networks, and that is important. You are addressing importance of social networks. Then you are mentioning there are many concerns regarding the privacy of users in these environments, such as how trustworthy the social network operators are, in addition to the external adversaries. So now you're coming to the problem of that in social networks, you're addressing the problem of privacy. Now, after introducing the problem, okay, although there is nothing much about related work here, okay, we could add a sentence about related work, but that's fine. So in this paper, we propose a new architecture for online social networking based on distributed cloud-based data centers and using secret sharing and the proposed method has this feature. So we have two sentences for the basically the proposed work section, and then we show that proposed architecture is highly secure in comparison to existing online social networks. And so that is, we are talking about the experimental results and analysis here. Okay, so this is not the ideal abstract, but this is just an example of abstract. Okay, once you have written abstract, then you come to acknowledgement section. And now this is time to acknowledge the help of uh, uh, all the people who have helped you in this particular course. It could be technical help, it could be logistic help. Everyone who deserve help, their name should be mentioned in the acknowledgement. So let's say if you go data set from somewhere, some organization, you can acknowledge their help. Or if you uh, discussed some ideas with someone who was not the part of the team, you can acknowledge their help and so on. So some examples would be if it is occasional scientific discussion with someone about the work which might have helped, you can put that in acknowledgement. If you obtain data set from some organization for your research, you can put them in acknowledgement. If there is some financial or scholarship support from someone, you can mention that in acknowledgement. Okay. Now there's a difference between being the part of the team, being as an author, and to be listed in acknowledgement. So that decision you have to basically make. I mean, in the context of your team, it is already finalized that you have a team, only 3 or 4 members or 2 members are there. No one else will be added in the authors. However, sometimes when we do research work, sometimes it happens that we are discussing ideas with many people, and then at the end we want to find out who should be the authors of this paper. So there you need to draw a line, who has contributed what, and whether this is up to the acceptable threshold to consider him or her as a co-author. If it is just occasional discussions, probably not. If they have contributed significantly greater than a threshold, then they should be the part of the work. Okay. Then finally, you write title, author's names, and affiliation. Okay. And in writing author's name and title, uh, title should not be too long to read. It should not be like coming in 2 lines. Okay, that does not look good. And it should not be too short to be understood. Okay, so that means you should try to make it short, but if it is too short that you can't understand uh, that whether it is reflecting the work or not, that is also not good. We should try to make it catchy so that it catches the attention of the readers and uh, people, so that they can read our work. Okay. So if you look at some of the titles of uh, my papers, I can give you some examples of some catchy titles. Out of around 130 articles, you would find that only few titles are catchy. Uh, we try to make it catchy, but let's see. The first title here, Watch Me From Distance, WMD. Uh, Although it is not too catchy, but we're trying to make it, you know, so that people get attention with the name of WMD. WMD is not a weapon of mass destruction, it is Watch Me From Distance. Another title, interesting title, would be, you could also name it like this, W3 model, W3 privacy model, so that you are giving a unique name to the work, and your work will be known from basically this title. Uh, Other than that, um, in terms of short title, you see there was a paper in which the title was only two words, anonymous surveillance. And uh, I assume that from anonymous surveillance, the idea is given to the readers that we are talking about a surveillance which is privacy aware. That means you're doing surveillance without compromising the privacy of people. There are other works like scale me, crop me, nomi note. That is also some sort of a catchy title. Okay. Um, so it is hard to find catchy title. However, that helps. Okay. All right. Coming back to this again. In terms of authors, all the authors who have contributed to the work should be listed, and the level of contribution is a matter of debate. However, we should use our conscience, and we should try to be fair how much each of the uh, team members have contributed. And the sequence of authors are usually determined by the level of their contributions in the context of research papers. And that also varies from field to field. In some of the fields, the authors are listed with the alphabetically, and in many of the computer science subfields, they are listed based on the contributions. And the first author is the person who contributed the most. Okay, and then subsequently the authors are listed. Uh, General practice is that your professor becomes the last author. Although it may not be true that he or she might have contributed least, but that is the usual practice. The first author is the main contributor of the work, and last author is basically the supervisor or the advisor of the work, and then there could be multiple authors in between. Okay. That is in the context of when, if you're submitting the work to be reviewed, we need to check whether review procedure is blind or non-blind. Non-blind means you can state author's name in the paper, and in blind that means there is some anonymity, and anonymity can be at two ends. It could be at the end of authors, it could be end of at the end of reviewers. So if you're talking about double blind means authors' names are also not listed, and authors will also not know who reviewed our work. That is double blind. If it is single blind, that means authors will list their name, so reviewers will know that whose work is this, However, authors will not know who are the reviewers. So reviewers know who are the authors, but authors don't know who are the reviewers. That is also generally done in practice in many of the journal papers, journal articles. Okay, then we come to writing references and bibliography. And referencing is something like which actually goes along all the sections. When you write all the sections, you keep on adding references. Now, question is what referencing style we should follow. It can vary from conference to conference, from journal to journal. However, whatever template you follow, it should be consistent. So, for example, in our report, if you look at this, I have given you a template, and that template basically will decide what style we are going to follow. So, in the context of this project, you would be following this style. So that means author's name first, then last name, and the author should be separated by a comma, and the last name before last author there should be and. Okay, then you put a dot and then write the title of the work. Then you write where it is published. So if it is published in a journal, you just write name of the journal, and then here it is volume number. Within volume number there is a issue number and the page number 7 to 20 and the year. Okay, if it is a conference paper, then it would come in international conference on this page is this, who published, whether it is a ACM conference or a Springer conference or IEEE conference, and generally there should be the location of the conference as well. So here, for example, here the location is provided. In this article it is not provided. We should try to make it complete, and that would be done basically here when you write your report in LaTeX, and when you develop your bibliography file, try to make sure that each reference is complete. Okay, so I'm talking about this file bibliography.bib, and if you click here, now you can see that there are multiple entries in this bibliography file. If it is a general article, then you use a @article tag and then provide all the details. Okay, title, authors, journal name, volume, issue or number, pages, year. If it is a conference paper or a proceedings, then you mention it in proceedings, and title, author, you write the conference title or book title. Now, if you are you have to be consistent. Let's say if you're writing proceedings of the, then the proceedings of the should come in every conference article which you add. If you're not mentioning it here, then it should not be anywhere. Okay, so you have to be consistent. Then you provide page numbers, year, address, that means where it was held. Here in this case the address is missing, so we should add in which city it was held. Okay, and there should be comma here, and it should be comma here. Okay, we can find where it was held. So if you want to find, if you don't know this information from the bib text where you have taken, so basically you can search it, and which year it was. Let's say 2018. Okay, 2018, and it will tell you where it was held. Okay, so this conference was held in 2018, was held in Las Vegas. So you basically put this here. Okay, and so on. So if it is a book, there's a different fields you need to provide. If it is a chapter from a book, then it would come in collection. If it is a web article, then you should provide all the details which are available title, how published, the link of the title, and maybe author as well, if you have that information available. Okay. All right. So then, coming back to this, you should provide author's name, proceeding titles, etc. All the information which is needed uh, in the references for a particular reference. Okay. There are some rules of thumb which we can follow. Uh, Write clearly and precisely. So as clearly you write, that is better. You should be clear in your writing. Don't try to dilute your novel contribution. That means you have to be upfront, explicit in writing what are your contributions, what are novel contributions in this work. If we cannot write clearly about our contributions, that means we don't know what we did. Okay, so you have to be very clear. English in the paper should be grammatically correct, of course. Appropriate choice of words is very important, and there are some general guidelines about linguistic issues. Although we are not expert in language, but we should try to learn from these general guidelines. And these are, we should try to avoid long sentences and break into short sentences. We should not write a sentence like one paragraph long. That is not good. We should try to break it into short sentences. Avoid long paragraphs. Avoid writing in passive voice. Write in simple present tense. Avoid writing in present continuous tense. So don't write it that we are doing experiment so and so. No, we did these experiments. Okay. While discussing the past work, we can use simple past tense. So that means this author did this. This author presented a method. At X at L discovered that. So we can use simple past tense in that case. We should try to write generally a V over I, although if it is a single author paper, we generally write V, like we are discussing this, we are describing this. Okay. Sentences should be linked to each other and should make a flow. Paragraphs should be linked to each other and make a flow. Make right use of prepositions, the, a, and etc. We are not language expert, but we try to learn from mistakes. And we should proofread our report multiple times before submitting. Okay. All right. So here I would like to end this. Do you have any questions? If not, then I would end this recording.